All right, good morning and welcome along to our 4th of August council meeting. We'll start off with apologies. We've got Councillor Holding and Councillor Linwood who are both apologies for lateness, and they will be joining us online, and we've also got Councillor Cowles joining us online. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan, and seconded Councillor Fowling. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Right, we're going to start today, and I'd ask everyone in the room to stand as we take a moment of silence for the passing of Councillor Hopkins. Thank you. I'd just like to note that you'll see around the council table today a whole lot of little flags at half-mast, which is very fitting. Thanks to Councillor Holding for that, and the red glasses, which is very fitting. We will start with a bit of a video tribute.
Your career, if I was a career advisor, you would be my enemy.
Yes.
Because you've had the most ridiculous CV all over the place.
Yes.
How did you have any plan to do what you were doing?
No. Well, yes, no, maybe. In search of a career trajectory, I went in to see if there was anything that I could meaningfully do or focus on. And they gave me all these tests, and they said, we can't find a job for you. The closest we can find is you might be a good auctioneer. And I thought, hold on. I thought, no, I can't do that.
If I was a sheep and you were a farmer, you'd be pretty keen to put me in my place.
First of all, apparently we're utterly incompetent, useless, and have been historically. And right now, I don't think Wellington really understands, and never has actually fully understood or respected local government. I do believe we have an obligation to care for the present, a duty of care to the present as well as the future. I believe we must respond with compassion to the sincere...
Bear with me for a minute, lads. The watch has come unstrapped. This is what happens when you take drugs.
And I mean, yes, look, why don't I stand in Corriedale and Waihemo and Oamaru? Then I could have 3 votes on the council table. That's why I got elected. I keep on thinking, you're going to lose the plot here, lad. And yet, latterly, I find myself doing things and thinking, that's as good as I've ever done anything. You know, what is happening here? So to all of you, thank you very much for watching, listening, asking questions. Have a great night, a great year, and a great life.
Thank you so much, Jason and the team, for that really wonderful video, because I think it's great to hear the voice. I think the voice is so much part of who Jim was. Jim would have had a few choice words about being centre of attention today. Probably sharp, definitely funny, and almost certainly followed by I shall retreat in disarray. While there have been lots of tears over the past week, there's also been a whole lot of laughter, because anyone who knew Jim had a story about him. He would have loved the heartfelt and often funny tributes that have come from all around the country. Jim really was a Kiwi icon. So to Jim's family, thank you again for sharing him with us. We offer you our deepest sympathy, but also our gratitude for the wisdom, mischief, and unmistakable Jimness that he brought to our council and our community. Jim had a rare way with words. Around the council table, I shall retreat in disarray became one of those phrases that could only ever belong to him. And when he signed off with Mon Dieu, or blamed the ever self-interested Microsoft It was pure Jim. Slightly exasperated, beautifully dramatic, and usually bang on the money. In one of his last messages to us, the councillors, he likened himself to Peter O'Toole. I had to Google him. But mon Dieu, the man had a point. Stud muffin, Jim may well have been on to something. I'm not going to expand on that one. But beneath the wit and the theatrical flourishes was a generous, thoughtful man with a really huge heart. When he heard my children were interested in Paris, he quietly gave me a beautiful book on the city and a little wooden sign for my daughter to paint. That was Jim, cultured, clever, kind, and just the right amount of outrageous. Late last year, when we asked councillors for a meaningful quote, Jim chose one from a French World War I general, Ferdinand Foch, at the time of the big German offensive in 1918. My centre is yielding. My right is retreating. Situation excellent. I am attacking. Jim called it cockeyed optimism. I call it a perfect little window into how his mind works. Backwards, sideways, brilliantly, and always with a bit of a twinkle. We'll miss him at Anzac, at the lighting of the tree, at the chocolate wheel, quiz nights, IHC, celebrity debates, and so many other occasions. And in all those moments when the room suddenly needed a perfectly timed quip. So to Jim, thank you for the mischief, the brilliance and the kindness, the drama and the love you gave this place. You leave us poorer for your absence, but much richer and considerably more entertained for having known you. Haere Jim, I hope wherever you are, that Microsoft hasn't followed you there. Thank you for the banter and the laughs. You may be gone for our table, but you'll always be a part of our team. I'm going to pass to whether any councillors or staff want to say anything. Councillor Felning.
Yeah, I had a lot to do with Jim through Rotary as well as council, and yeah, he did everything selflessly for the community. He gave a lot to it, and he had fun doing it. And I did crack up when he talked about the careers advisor suggesting he'd be an auctioneer, and he turned out to be an excellent auctioneer actually. So he raised thousands of dollars through charity auctions at Rotary. He also was one of the very few people who would turn down the offer of a microphone when speaking publicly and actually didn't need it. He definitely didn't need the microphones, and whether it was Bookarama or Toyarama, and he'd show up, he'd be there at everyone, and he'd always actually I think probably a large part of why they made so much money was he'd be buying as many books as we were selling. He loved Bookarama, and yeah, he's a great asset to the Rotary Club, and he's going to be hugely missed. So yes, yeah, very sad to lose him, but we're much the better for having him.
Thank you. Councillor Cowles.
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, look, for me, I've been away on leave and had a lot of time to reflect on Jim. I had a short broadcasting career for a few years, and he was always a man that I looked up to. The breadth of his broadcasting, and I always remember him actually growing up and on telethon, his generosity of time and what he gave. But all I can say is I really hope the pearly gates haven't upgraded to two-factor authentication, because he'll be very frustrated today. But I'll leave you with that.
Thanks, Brent. Franz.
Yeah, as a new councillor and having sat here with Jim for the last 10 months, I never quite figured out whether he liked me or not. He kept calling me boy, which really annoys me. I'm 68 next month, and I'm bloody sure he knew it annoyed me. But that is Jim. But I do remember, though, And I thank Jim for that. You know, he probably in those last 10 months has managed to be told off more by our mayor or the chair than I have. And in a way that to me was a great learning curve, because I sort of figured out, looking at Mel chairing these meetings, I knew to recognise the look on her face when the daggers were just about to come out of her eyes, so I knew how far to go. I remember Jim, of course, fondly. I had dealings with Jim before actually becoming a councillor, and I'm just grateful for this time that I've had with him. The man obviously is a legend, you know, for what he has given to this council, or this district, I should say, and I would suggest that in the future, if the opportunity presents itself, that something is going to make sure that future generations will remember Jim for the legend that he really was. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. Yes, I've known Jim for, I was counting back, over 25 years, both broadcasters, in various capacities, doing sound jobs with Jim. I always used to joke that I'd put a half-flat battery in a radio mic so it would give us a bit of respite after an hour of his introduction. And as Sven said, he didn't really need a microphone, but he still took it anyway. I've interviewed Jim countless times on radio, and he was always well researched. He knew what he was talking about, and if you hadn't done your homework, he'd find that, and it could be an interesting conversation. I've also had the pleasure and privilege of being on debating teams with Jim, and that was something I absolutely treasured. It's snowing, goodness gracious me. It's something I really treasured, and I think probably the only thing better than Jim on stage in an IHC celebrity debate was Johnny Allen being in the audience, because Jono had a very infectious laugh, and he found Jim hilarious, and Jim found Jono's laugh hilarious. So it was the definition of humour, perpetual motion. One would start the other off and it just wouldn't stop, and it was a special place to be. It seems really odd speaking of Jim in the past tense, because he's very present in this room and has been for a very long time, and as has been said, has given countless years of service to local authorities, 12 years in Banks Peninsula prior to 19 years here, and I think that really does need to be acknowledged. And also his connections with the community and the way that he actually interacted with people. I know Phil Martin from Oamaru Intermediate said to me that when he brought his students in from intermediate school to council chambers, the attention, the love that Jim showed for them engaging in something which is their birthright, which is getting involved in making decisions, was something that he found very, very special. So he'll be missed around the table and around the community, and I'd just like to say thank you to his family, for sharing it. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Councillor McCone.
Yeah, I didn't really know Jim until I sat around this table. And my first meeting, I thought, here's a celebrity, what's going on here? And then he's got stuck in, and he got right stuck in because I hadn't done my homework. Lesson number one. He did his homework, he worked hard for everything he did, and he would back it right to the finish. And it's inspiring for anybody that wants to sit around this table to learn the lessons that he taught us all. He didn't necessarily listen at times, and he could be totally frustrating, but that's part of the job. I'm going to miss him, his humour, his thought, but his caring for the community, and I'll miss him as a friend. And anybody that aspires to sit around this table or thinks they should, look at a few of those past videos and bits and pieces, and you'll learn so much. So Thanks for the privilege, Jim.
So, on behalf of myself and on behalf of staff, we will deeply miss Jim. Sometimes like a hole in the head. When you got that document through, the 300-page document that he'd scribbled all over, minutes before the meeting you received that and wondered what you're going to do with all those scribbles. And also his various encounters with IT that he had. But he was very, very engaged with staff of this organisation. Some of you may know from the day he was elected, he paid up to be a member of the staff social club, and wasn't just a passive member, was an active member of the social club, engaging with staff. He always kept us on our toes. Where there was Jim, there was questions. And sometimes not where you thought they'd be. He has always prided himself on reading everything, getting into the detail, and asking questions about everything. And I remember him telling me several times that was part of the elected member role, was to keep asking questions to make sure that we got things right. And part of that was sometimes catching me out as well in my rare distractions where I might have checked an email in a meeting, and him asking a question and then saying at the end, "And I want the chief exec to answer this." And I'm flustered, wondering what it was that had been asked this time. I think most of all, Jim was a man of the community, and community was his focus, which councils are organisations that are for community, and I think that constant focus that he brought to community and how what we do impacts the community is something that we will miss deeply around this table. I also think he kept the art of debate alive. I'm not just talking about the debates in terms of the public debates that he held, but in the council chamber and in the public eye as well. And too often we see the debates centering around the person, and he would focus on debating the issues, and that's something we need to hold on to. Keep debating the issues, not debating the people. He personally gave me a lot of support, and I will miss that support in terms of dealing with the challenges that we face in local government and within the community. But most of all, he brought humour, and it was a joy to have little spars with him, humorous spars, trying to catch each other out. And I think that's something we keep alive around this table in dealing with the thorny issues that we face as a community and within local government, is to keep the humour alive, to honour him and what he brought to this table.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm just trying to compose myself, so I appreciate everyone having saying a few words in tribute to our councillor Jim. I think for me, when I first got into council in 2019, I always appreciated and valued his support for me as a new elected member at the time, and trying to find my voice around the table was a bit of a struggle. So I always appreciated his wisdom and his the quiet nudges in the background and the phone calls that I would receive in the weekend just to share his views, and he would seek out my views. But I always remember the heart that Jim had, and those of us that knew that his health was deteriorating, he never showed it, and he always worked hard to ensure that he was always contributing around the table, as what Alex had mentioned. He always kept that debate and that spirit alive. And I always valued that, and there's that saying, a life lived for others is a life worth living. And I think for me that honours the spirit and the essence of what our councillor Jim had gifted to us around the table, to our organisation and to our wider community. And I think that spirit and heart of service is something that we should always treasure and was a true gift. I know Jim will be looking down at us, and he will be retreating in disarray. But we should always remember the service and the life spirit that he brought to our work. And while we might have the banter and the debates, he was always ready and open and having a cup of tea or a coffee with you. And so I really valued and I appreciate just the life that Jim had for us, and I would love for us just to be upstanding and we can sing a wee waiata for him. Te aroha, te
Thank you, Hannah. If there's no one else, and I know that there's some that are struggling, so we won't push in any other direction on that one. But I think he would have really appreciated those tributes. We will get moving through the agenda. And first of all, I guess, looking at whether or not there's any declarations of interest. If there is none, we'll, no registrations for the public forum today, so we'll move on to my leadership report. And I'll take it as read, but I guess probably the biggest updates is in the simplifying local government or the Head Start proposal space. We had a really fruitful and good meeting in Timaru last week on Wednesday, which was with 5 councils. So that was Waitaki, Timaru, Waimate, Mackenzie and Ashburton. All of the 4 of us, Waimate, Waitaki and Mackenzie have all basically voted to put together a Head Start proposal. Ashburton's due to make a decision on that tomorrow, so we're working in the coalition of the willing, so we'll see where Ashburton falls out of that process. But there is currently a Head Start application that is being put together. It will be high level because that's certainly what the government has been asking for, but it was really heartening to see that the conversation through the number of councils we were in a huge amount on the same page, which was really good. And I think the idea of every council needs to benefit from this and all of our communities need to benefit from this was a really good underlying message that came through. There still is going to be so much detail to work through, and we need to work on some really good processes. But I guess we've first of all got the 9th of August, which is when that's due in, timetable in front of us, and after that we'll get a bit more understanding when government have worked through all their proposals as to whether or not we're stepping into that space. So it's a really unknown space at the moment. Just to speak a little bit on the Waihemo part of our resolution, I want to be first of all really clear that our first resolution and our main one is that Waitaki stays together as a whole, but we do want to have more conversations. So I did see, we watched a couple of meetings over the last few days of other councils, and I did see Waihemo mentioned as being orphaned by Waitaki, and I just want to be really clear that it absolutely isn't. We love Waihemo, and it's part of Waitaki, and it will stay part of Waitaki. But in saying that, I do think there was enough split on that community in the feedback we got that we just need to understand more, because the future of the communities looking south from here, they need to drive their own future, and I don't want to have a council that assumes we know best. So that's where the differences lie on that one, but the original Head Start proposal we're putting in will include all of Waitaki. It's great to know that there is openness and willingness to have other conversations with our southern boundary, but that will come in the future. Looking south, it is a little bit of a mixed bag, and I guess at the moment we just need to recognise that the timeframes have been really tight, and every council is doing their very best to come out with the best outcome for their own communities. So yeah, tough times, and a lot can happen in a week in politics. Based on that, have councillors got any questions on my report? Councillor McCone.
It's a very good report, but it doesn't cover off what you yourself have done. So congratulations for everything that's going on, the time you put in. It needs to be recognised. It's huge. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Strack.
Just a general comment in line with Councillor McCown's, not only to you, also to our Chief Executive, Alex. You know, I made it very clear that this whole Head Start process is something that involves all of us, not just the two of you. And I think you have done notably well in keeping us informed, keep us engaged, and that has to be said, that's appreciated, and obviously we'll continue in that matter, but I think that's got to be said. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to also really acknowledge Deputy Mayor Ryan, who's joined me in all the Canterbury-based conversations, which it's just been really great to have that extra person at the table, because there's such big conversations to bring back to councillors. I've really appreciated the support and work there, Rebecca. Thank you. Is there anything else on that? Right, well, I'm going to put that. So all in favour of receiving my report? Oh, sorry. I'll move it from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Downing. I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. And now we'll move on to the Chief Executive's report, I believe, is next. I'm just scrolling. And my computer's frozen, but I'll pass over to you.
So yeah, next on the agenda is the interim update. So this was something that was initiated by Performance Audit and Risk Committee, and then agreed to by PAR to give at each council meeting an update on the financial position, and then any other updates as well. So the financial position is set out there, which hopefully matches what the members of PAR considered yesterday. I've also given brief updates also on the simplifying local government, the progress with establishing Southern Waters and transitioning our water services over to Southern Waters, and the long-term plan. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Downing.
Yeah, just noting the planned budget. It's on track at the moment. Have we got any early indications how far off track it might get as a result of the weather we've had?
No, we're still evaluating that at this stage, but I think we need to bear in mind we're still very early on in the financial year, so we're just at the moment counting the cost of the weather events.
Yeah, thank you.
No, I guess just wanting to really recognise the work that's gone into the water plan and the transition work that's happening there, on top of the simplifying local government work that the staff have managed to pull together in a very short time frame while we move into the long-term plan. So there's a huge amount going on, and just want to thank staff for the work that has happened in the background, because I think often it's not recognised how much is being worked on. Councillor McCone.
Yeah, I'd just like to concur with your words, and that we're in a limbo at the moment. It's almost like the eye of a hurricane. We know what's going on around outside us, but we don't know the end result. And I think we're on track, but we don't know what that track is. So.
Right, so if there's nothing else, do I have someone willing to move the seat? Thank you, Councillor McCone. Councillor Slack. All in favour, please say aye. And against? Aye. That's carried. So now we will move on to the reports of the Chief Executive and staff, and this is the Waitaki District Council draft commercial strategy. Are you open?
Yes, I'll open this. Apologies from Joe O'Neill, who's been leading this work, and we're joined by Catherine Lancaster online, who's been supporting us with this work. This builds on the workshops we've held over the course of the first half of the year. In this report, Council has been asked to adopt a commercial strategy as a structured framework to guide how we approach commercial decision-making, governance, risk management, and workstream delivery. And the strategy really responds to the financial environment that we're operating in, including the ongoing operating deficits, the increased financial pressure on rates, and the need to strengthen our long-term financial sustainability. I've got to say it's not the solution to the challenging financial environment, but it's part of the solution. And it doesn't seek to make every part of the council commercial. Instead, it's about applying greater financial discipline, understanding the true cost of services, and improving the use and return from our assets, whilst also looking at other opportunities to be commercial. Importantly, in this, the strategy keeps public value at the centre of decision making. Councils are not like most commercial businesses that are designed to generate profits. Councils exist to generate public value, often providing services and assets that can't be provided by the commercial sector on a profitable basis. So the strategy therefore recognises that commercial activity should only be pursued where it supports council's objectives for our community in terms of the public value we wish to generate, but also where it supports our risk appetite and remains affordable and achievable. So if adopted, the strategy will provide a mandate for implementation across 6 connected work streams, so commercial governance, cost transparency, pricing and funding, the property strategy acceleration, Whitestone contracting and the commercialisation or commercial development of our CCO, commercial assets, and then venues and community facilities and optimising those. These work streams won't all happen at once, they'll be developed over time, so there's a need to prioritise. So this is not a quick fix, this is about a long-term plan to support changing our financial position. And I also need to point out that adopting the strategy does not approve any single individual project at this stage, or investment or asset disposal. That will be worked through, the detail will be worked through, in particular starting with the power workshops, where there should be a focus as to what does commercialisation mean for those individual services that are being considered, but also through the long-term plan as a starting point for discussing some of the detail around how we become more commercial. I also have to say that any significant proposals coming out of this would be coming back to council with appropriate business cases for that final decision. So the recommendation is for council to adopt the strategy as presented, and this will give us a clear and disciplined framework to diversify revenue where appropriate, reduce future reliance on rates, strengthen commercial governance and capability, and support us in generating a more financially sustainable position going forward.
Thank you. We had a bit of a discussion about whether it was time to bring this to council or not, and it has been workshopped a number of times, and I think the best way to start this conversation is just being really open and honest about where we're at. And I guess where my biggest concern lies, and it's not in the strategy because I think that there's a lot of stuff in here that's really fantastic. What worries me is the workload that we've got in front of us with Head Start. It's the fact that at the end of the week we have a Head Start proposal that's going into central government that could change our whole existence and the way we work for the next 2 years. And I guess my brain is really struggling to work, while I recognise we also really need to commercialise what we do a whole lot more and look to the future and not be so reliant on rates funding. I just wonder where the 2 work streams align and how you do them both justice when we're trying to say we've got too much on our plate. It's a really long-winded question and it's a bit of a tough one, but I'll send that one your way. Sorry, I know it's hard.
Okay. So I'd start by saying look at the commercial strategy as not as a work stream, but as changing the way we approach things. So when we get into, we still need to do long-term planning. So when we get into that, it's a lens in which we look at things through in terms of the services and how we approach them rather than a work stream on its own. Some of it is building on some of the thinking we're doing already. So, for example, the property strategy, that's already in place. We're already working on that, and it's a case of how do we accelerate that. So I think it's a case of saying this is a strategy that helps guide us rather than being a task or a piece of work in its own right that, yeah, we're going to have to implement. It's about how we'll implement it by the way we do things and changing our approach to those things. In terms of the Head Start, I think that is clearly consuming us and our thoughts at the moment. I still have a caution around that, in that all that we're doing around that has no status in legislation whatsoever at this stage. It is based on a government policy announcement, and so whilst it is a great opportunity to reshape the way local government works within this district, we need to be cautious that in politics we know things change, and all of this is subject to legislation being passed next year, mid-2027, which is subject to what the shape of the government is that comes back. So unfortunately it stretches our capacity, but we need to plan for the scenario that Head Start goes ahead, and we need to plan for the scenario that it doesn't, or it changes shape, or that we are not selected to be in that, and therefore Waitaki District Council is going to be in place for at least another 5 years potentially. So and in the meantime we need to look at how we operate and continue to look at how we reduce the pressure on ratepayers, which is part of this. So rather long answer, but I think look at this through a lens of how we do things, but also we need to plan for different scenarios where the Head Start goes ahead or it doesn't in the next few years.
That's all right. It wasn't a straightforward question. Councillor Cowles.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I guess I'm similar thinking. I fully support the intent of having a commercial strategy, but my understanding of our costs, we need an understanding of our costs, stronger commercial discipline, and less reliance on rates. But I guess my biggest concern is that sequence of it, rather than the direction of where we're taking. I hear what you're saying, that this may not go through, but we're not far from finding out, at least back from the government, what their intent is, at least, once we've got our Head Start program in, and then we've got all the power workshops coming up, which to me form the baseline of understanding what our true costs are and where we can be more commercial, and that may change our view on the strategy, or it may feed into the strategy a little bit more. I know we've done an awful lot of work already. I guess the strategy itself says we lack a clarity on the true cost of services, and that the cost and that cost transparency is foundational to everything else. And I think these power workshops would certainly help us with that. And then around the regional reorganisation proposal in front of us, which we've obviously got there today, the strategy has been written on the assumption that we continue in its current form. And whilst we don't know what that future is, I think there's actually more of an opportunity for us to look wider once we do understand what that is. So I guess my concern as well is similar. We've got limited resources with people, and we've got a huge workload coming up. We've got limited finances at the moment, and I'm just wondering, it's not that we don't do this, but as we went through the power reviews, if we keep this, this commercial thinking first and foremost, and then look at how that might be able to complete or feed into that final strategy, for me, I just feel that would be a better sequence. So I guess that's probably my view on it. I guess my question there out of this is if we adopt this now and set up the resources, and then we are moving down the Head Start, the risk in our financial thing, where do you see that risk of what it may cost us? I guess we don't really know what it's going to cost to set up, and in the way of staff resources and those sorts of things, Alex.
So I'll probably go back to the answer I gave before. It's about not setting up a whole commercial team. It's about how we do things rather than dedicating resources to it. And I think the timing now would be helpful in terms of providing some tools and some prompts in terms of reviewing our services through that power and long-term plan process. I'd offer a general caution as well, and having experienced this in a different context when potential reform and reorganisation is on the table, beware of the danger of inertia, that everything stops. And I think we've got to remember that, whilst change might happen in terms of the way we're structured, we need to keep on delivering for our community, and whatever that shape might look like in terms of the future change and the timing of that, putting ourselves as an organisation in the best position possible for that change is important as well. We've got some challenging work to do through that long-term plan process still. I think whilst the annual plan made inroads this year, I think seeing this as a tool that will help us in terms of those challenging discussions that we need to have, as providing different approaches to how we fix the financial situation in terms of sustainability and balanced budgets is important.
Now I've got quite a few councillors to speak. I've got Deputy Mayor Ryan, then Councillor Thowning, then Councillor Schlack, then Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. I guess my question is probably more broad around the development of the strategy itself, because I guess where I'm a little bit stuck at the moment is I feel like it's trying to do a lot at once. It's a strategy, it's an implementation program, a work plan, and I would love for us to be, and especially I guess with the uncertainty ahead, we should be really focused on the principles, because work programs can kind of evolve, and there's so much that we don't know at the moment, and I feel like I would love to see us have a strategy of just some really good principles of how to be more commercial, to be making good commercial decisions, because at the moment, it is a massive document, and honestly, I think if someone asked me what are the key principles we want staff and ourselves to apply when making decisions, I don't think I could answer that having read this document, and that's what I would like. Yeah, that's where I'm sort of a bit stuck. So I guess I'm kind of interested to hear how it's been developed in this way, rather than kind of separating it out, because at this stage I'd love to support something that sort of embeds those principles into our thinking, but I just feel a bit lost with the work streams and everything else that's in it at the moment.
So I can start on that, and then maybe Catherine will come in. So I think our original intention was to have purely a strategy, but it became apparent from some of the feedback we were getting in the workshops that there was a desire to see more of the pathway forward as to how we were going to implement the strategy. So it's directly responding to the workshops that trying to show how this might be implemented. I think the implementation pathway I think is still up for debate, but I think the strategy is the key thing here in terms of the adoption. Catherine, do you want to add to that at all? Someone who's been working on this very closely.
Yeah, no, that was a good summary. Initially, the strategy was the feedback we've got, there wasn't enough detail in it. So we put together the sort of, I think I've referred to them as indicative work streams. There was just one point I wanted to refer to, and that was around resourcing and effort. And it has specifically been designed so that it needs ownership, but it doesn't need to be resourced with a set, a team or full-time people working on it. And just one example that I think where this sort of thinking can be brought to life without a huge amount of effort is going into the LTP process, where you may need to look at your revenue and financing policy and how your services are funded. It would be this time when you go into your LTP and looking at your revenue and financing, having a much tighter look at your funding sources for your service delivery, and starting to think around how could we change that rates, non-rate mix, and looking at some of the levers that were in the strategy to then feed back to the teams and the services input into the LTP to say, we really need to think harder and closer about non-rates funding and how we can build this into the LTP. So that's sort of an example where you can put focus on the strategy that links through to the LTP without having a significant increase in effort or recruitment or cost.
No, thank you for that, Catherine. It's appreciated. Councillor Thowning.
My thoughts on it was quite good overall. I do agree with the general direction and the way of doing things. I think it is good to think more commercially to get more value. And I note the purpose is not to maximise profit. So getting into the detail a wee bit, it's a wee bit inconsistent to have that as a goal is not to maximise profit. The idea is to do things better, but then one of the entire work streams is criticising Whitestone contracting for not returning enough profit. And so I don't see how that lines up. And then in one point it says it's not necessarily about selling Whitestone, another bit says it's not about selling Whitestone, which is two very different things. And I think it's a bit cart before the horse to be talking about that without first having an offer on the table to talk about. So there's probably no point even having that work stream at all. I'd probably put that in with the rest of the CCOs, because the way I see it is we've only made one surplus in the last 10 years or something like that, and I think we're probably the worst organisation to be going and trying to change how a profitable organisation works. So I'd probably, I'd like to see a bit more alignment through that. Is it about profit maximisation or is it not?
Yeah, probably my response to that would be should say it's not exclusively about profit maximisation, because clearly in some areas, we need to generate more income. And for some areas that might mean profitability, and some areas that just means that they're getting more income in to cover their costs. Some of the services and facilities we operate on, many of them will never generate a profit. It's just about a case of how do they maximise the income from that. I think there is a more general comment. Whitestone specifically is mentioned in there. We do need to be looking at our CCOs as to what is the community value generated from them. In terms of Whitestone, it's not just about profitability. Their aim is to bring other things, benefits to our community as well. But I think when we had the discussions through the workshops, that Whitestone had been singled out as an area where there was greater potential, particularly given the infrastructure needs of New Zealand generally and this part of the country, water investment and other investment that's going to be required. It was felt that there was an opportunity there. And it wouldn't be us making it more profitable. It'd be about the people around the board table and the management of Whitestone that would be working to do that.
Yes, supplementary to that, I'd agree with that about Whitestone's got a bright future, which on one hand, if we want to take the one-off sugar hit and sell it, we could do that. Now would be the time to do that. But on the flip side, if it's got a bright future and it's got other value to the community, then we can weigh that up. But I still think it's cart before the horse if we don't know what offers on the table from an external party. And I'd also like to see the same logic applied to the other CCOs and joint ventures too. I don't see why they couldn't potentially also be managed differently. And I think we've got a role as governance in that too, with our leaders of expectation.
Councillor Schlack. I'll just pause you for a second. Catherine, did you have something to respond to that one?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it didn't, the reason why Whitestone was identified in the strategy was just because of its scale compared to the other CCOs. So because of its materiality and having limited resources to make an impact, that's why that one was included. But the same principles definitely apply to the other CCOs. It was just a matter of impact.
Yeah. Councillor Schlack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, I just want to respond to a very significant remark that Mr. Palmley made, and that's the risk of Head Start. And you used the word inertia. Very, very well picked, that word. And if I think of yesterday's workshop in the PAR, and we discussed the risk assessments there, I don't think we even discussed or have got that risk in there. And that's definitely something we have to keep in mind, very much so, because I think with our LTP discussions, we're going to run into this as in keep the Head Start in the back of our minds. So I don't have a solution for it yet, but I'm certainly going to think about it. I have some comments to make about the strategy that is being put before us, and I'm just going to be my blunt, usual self here, I think. I really, when I saw this coming up on the agenda, I thought this is great because we do need a commercial strategy. We need to change things from relying on just on rates, revenue, etc. But reading through this very large report, I really thought it lacked some bones, some concrete actions that says, okay, just for example, we're going to identify now our assets, this is what we're going to look, etc. It is a report that sets out a plan until 2030, and I think in the situation that we are, we really need to work much faster than that in the commercial space. I'm going to say this, and I hope my comment is going to reverberate through the council, because the length of a document, of a report, does not present quality as such. There's 50-odd pages purely on this, and I would much rather have a 12-page report, and I've been guilty of this in my working life as well, trust me. I presented a 117 business report to my CEO one day, and he wasn't happy with it. So I created a lot of attachments, A till J, I'll never forget that. But fact of the matter is, this is very long, and that does not represent quality, and that is a message I think should go towards our consultants as well. It picks up on the point that you made, Madam Mayor, about do we actually have time for this? And these lengthy reports really cut into our times, and frankly, do we give it the attention it deserves after page 27? I think these are things that have to be kept in mind. Sorry, but I think well, not sorry, that is how I see it. What I found lacking in the report was the actual management of debt. I can't really find it in there, and I think that should be part of a commercial strategy. Next year, when the bulk of our debt gets transferred to another entity that we are still, in a way, responsible for, we are going to have this breathing room, as in what can we do? That happens after the 1st of July next year. And I have nothing personally against having debt, as long as we have a plan to repay that debt. That is part of a business plan. And I think that should be addressed as part of a commercial strategy. I support that an attempt is made towards a commercial strategy to put in place. I think there's a lot lacking still in this document, just to have some more concrete things in there that we already can take and can work on. And I think that report should be reviewed, make it shorter, make it to the point, but include in there things that we can already take up and start working with. We can't wait until 2030. We're gone by then, whether it is financially or gobbled up by a Head Start process. So, we, in our retreats, and I hope I'm not talking out of turn here, we said we're going to be bold and brave. That is what we all agreed, right? It's on the notice board. We got pictures to prove it. This report does not represent bold and brave. For me, it is too wide, too broad, not specific enough, and it hasn't got bones.
I think just to not push back on what you're saying, because I think I can see exactly where you're coming from around things like the length of the report. And I think that's where the difficulty comes when, we workshop this a number of times, and we as councillors tend to say we want a bit more understanding of how you're going to do this. What does this actually mean? What's the detail? We don't see, anything workable in this. And then we get the workable coming back to us, which we may not agree with all the detail, but I think that's where it becomes problematic. And that's that kind of what's the right level of detail discussion that we get stuck in quite a bit, because some councillors want a whole lot more and some want a lot less. But I do think you've got a good argument in in the fair amount of workload at the moment, to have a report of this size, you do wonder how much justice is done to it by governance in the timeframes we have to get across things. It's just, it is a challenge, and I think what we're hearing around the table today, and I will let everyone else talk, sorry, is that there's a real willingness to step into that commercial space, but it's just not feeling like it's quite hitting. But no one's entirely able to put the finger on why, but I'll unpack that a little bit shortly. But carry on to Councillor Lewis and Councillor McCone.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'm very much in agreement with what's been said around here as well. As somebody who's spent a career using word economy, trying to squeeze as much information into a 30-second commercial and writing that way, I very much appreciate condensed information. I'm very supportive of a commercial strategy. I mean, we need to mitigate our reliance on rates. You know, we have an ageing population, we have a small district, a large district, a small base, and increasing costs, and we know that, and that's been one of the things that we've said for a long time, is that we need to rebalance the way that we actually pay for things. So I'm broadly supportive of a commercial strategy, and it's fine as a direction, but I do have concerns with the implementation and what's been said just before. Any business involves risk. Any business involves risk, and traditionally councils, quite rightly, have been pretty risk averse because we have to realise it's not our money that we're playing with, it's our community's money that we invest in this. And I think that's also one of the other enemies of any business investment, is undercapitalisation. You have to have that money to enable to do that, and you then have to know what you're doing with it. In over 40 years, I started wheeling and dealing when I was 16, you learn to trust your gut, and you also learn to make decisions pretty quickly. You have to be agile, because if you've got a long decision-making process that goes through, and it's all very well, generally the opportunities down the road, somebody else has grabbed it and you've missed it. So you need, if you're doing that, you need to be in a position where you're able to respond, you're able to make decisions, you're able to take the information and deal with it as it happens. And to that point, as has been raised with regards to Whitestone contracting, it's successful because the people who know what they're doing are doing what they do. And my concern is that if we don't have the right people running those businesses and doing that, and any investment that we go into or any commercial strategy that we develop, we're going to clip the wings and it's not going to see its full potential. So whilst I'm broadly supportive of it, I do absolutely agree, and I'm not trying to be unkind when I talk about a word salad, but there's lots of ways that you can actually present something, and I know there's a lot of work that's gone in, and again, it's possibly that disconnect between the way council does things and the way that commercial business does things, and we've got to find that bridge to work between the 2 points. So I think it needs some revision, I think it needs some refinement, but I do think we need to look at a commercial strategy, and I do believe that we need to balance that out.
Thank you. Councillor McCone.
Well, there's not much point because everything's been said. So, look, I totally endorse what's been said. I think we're looking at it the wrong way as well as far as the CCOs go. You know, we've got a board of directors that are in charge of running those and returning an issue back. We're not looking at what is causing a lot of the debt that we've got, and some of the assets that we have are not being commercially viable or whatever it is. There's a lot of dead wood out there we could look at before something that is actually giving us an annual return or supporting something, and we can go down that track. And then that's going down into the weeds. Yeah, we do have a problem. I 100% support the intent, and I 100% think we need to have a financial strategy. The timing right now is at timing. We don't know what's coming around the corner, and I take Alex's point that if we sit on our hands and everything else, but I've read this thing 3 times. And that took a bit of doing. the ideas are there. The way it's structured out is, there's no room for agility to move quickly, the way I read it. There's quite a bit in there that just needs to be tweaked up, and my thought would be to actually put it on the table or send it back to a committee to actually be reviewed and bring it back again, and for two reasons. One, we're going to know exactly which direction we're heading by the end of September, and it's not that hard to bring it back then, in that time. And secondly, we're going to know exactly where we need to go strategically straight off the bat, as opposed to being so broad and wide with what we've got coming down the track.
Councillor Thowning.
I actually thought it was a good detailed document, so I guess I'm probably the odd one out there. And despite not liking the direction of one part of it, one bit I did really like was Workstream 6, which was the venues and community facilities optimisation. I think we've got a double-edged sword here where Oamaru and Waitaki have far more public facilities of the likes of the event centre, the opera house, the gallery, the museum, the aquatic centre, heaps of parks, all that sort of thing, than most districts of this size. The double-edged sword, because it that takes a lot of looking after, and we're not doing a great job of it, which sort of strengthens the need for this commercial strategy, and a little bit more about the or cross-referencing to asset management might be a good thing too, particularly in that venues and community facilities. And I know that we've got a financial strategy as well, so you're possibly just cross-referencing to those a bit more strongly within the thing. But yeah, I think we've got huge potential for doing things a bit more commercially at some of those places, and it doesn't. There's ways to do that you see done overseas where visitors are charged more than locals and things like that, so you're protecting the people who own the assets while benefiting from the tourism that we're also investing in with our capital as well. So yeah, I strongly support the venues and community facilities optimisation part of the document there.
Thank you. I'm going to take Councillor Ryan, or Deputy Ryan, and then I've got a bit of a thought about how we might move forward, because I think we need to sort of find a direction after this. So, yeah, Deputy Ryan.
Thank you. And I guess just, yeah, following on from where Councillor Thowning was, because something that I did like about the document was in terms of that utilisation of our community facilities. But I guess what I think is missing is kind of guidance on how those opportunities should be identified, because, like, say we're talking about the event centre, for example, you know, if we're talking about increasing utilisation there, the strategy kind of leans more towards financial performance pricing, governance, property, like decisions, instead of how can we be creating more value, how can we increase utilisation, partnerships. And I just, you know, if you're a manager or staff, you know, reading this document, naturally you're going to fall into where it repeatedly talks about pricing, financial performance, where I think there's other questions that we should be asking, and that's what I want to see from a strategy. Like, that's what I really want to see embedded in everything we're doing, is asking those questions. And yeah, that's just for me, and I recognise there's lots of different views, I guess, around this table, and that's the challenge that we have, is pulling those all together. But that's where I am at the moment, I think.
Thank you, Rebecca. I think, and I guess this is probably my trepidation about bringing this at this stage, and I know we've had a number of workshops, but I feel like the workshops have happened in a space where there's been so many other big things all at the same time, that it's probably almost been that element of overload that people have kind of done as least possible across those things, because this document hasn't probably been the most important thing we've had all the time in front of us, because we keep having, you know, your water strategies and your plans and your other things that have trumped it. So people have probably done this, a bit of a light touch on this one a wee bit up till now, when the rubber hits the road on it. And we're just not quite there. I think that there is a real willingness to have a commercial strategy, and there's some real gems in here, and there's a few bits that are still uncomfortable. And for myself as well, I do look and I recognise the idea of immersion being an issue when it comes to the Head Start proposal, but I also think that a decision on the Head Start proposal, whether we're working in a direction or not working in a direction, probably makes this document a little bit different, not markedly different, but I do think that probably when it comes to the implementation and what we're doing, and also how we look at what we're protecting as a council and a community, the conversation may look slightly different depending on what direction we're heading in. So I just probably put that out there. I'm guessing, do you have something else you want to say before I put something out there? I just felt like you were moved.
Well, I was going to say, again, the danger of inertia, and also, with the Head Start, I'm careful what I say, but the government said it will come back in September. I just have a question, will it come back in September? We're all seeing what's happening in government at the moment. How long is this government going to be in a position to make decisions? Is it going to be in a position to make a major decision about local government a few weeks out from a national election? So that's just another caution, and I think we are very focused on Head Start and reshaping, but we need to make sure we don't get caught out. We still need to keep planning for this community and this council and delivering, and we've got some challenging things to do. And I think accepting that the strategy isn't quite right for you, but I think if we say no, we're not going to do this at this stage, let's put this on the back burner for a few months. I think it might be a missed opportunity. So I'd rather look at how do we get it to a point where it is something that council could agree that can feed into what will be a challenging long-term plan process and help us shape that. And I agree, we would love to move ahead quicker, but I think the long-term plan is the key tool in which you start to look at how you implement this. I got to say, I'm finding it a bit challenging. I've got mixed messages, I feel, in terms of where council is at on this. In terms of, we want to shorten it to be a strategy, but some of us want more detail in terms of the implementation. And I think, it can't be all things to all people. So I think, I'd welcome some guidance from councillors to what it is you want. Is it just the strategy at this stage, and we remove all reference to implementation, or do you want a detailed implementation plan, because that will take more time, and we envisage that implementation would be through looking at things through that long-term plan process and those workshops to identify what are the key opportunities we're going to take forward. So I think resolving some of those mixed positions that you have around the table, so we can have some clear guidance on what you want to do with it if you want to change it. That's if you still want to go ahead with a commercial strategy.
Absolutely take your point, and I think, like, I look at Councillor Hopkins' seat over there, and this is something he wanted to happen 2 years ago, not now, and he's really struggled with that time frame. I think there is a few views around the table, but I think that we actually just need to spend a bit more time on it so we can bring those views back. I don't think I can send, or any of us can send you, a really clear direction today on how we fix that. I think it just needs a little bit more unpacking. And I'm going to be recommending essentially that this goes back to the Strategy and Advocacy Committee for a bit more workshop time. Looking to the chair of that committee to see if that's something she's open to. Just because I think it's a wee bit of a time thing. I do think that we probably need to bring it back to just being the strategy at this first instance, just to really simplify that, and then as to how we implement that might come afterwards, because I think sometimes we need to bite it off in workable chunks, and I feel like this is just all a huge amount all at once. And if we can get the strategy over the line, because I think when it comes to where we're sitting at, the strategy is something we all agree is needed. There's a wee bit of tweaking in how long does the strategy need to be, what does it look like, and how much detail does it need to go in, and there's a wee bit of finessing around some of the detail that we still need to debate out and spend some time on. And I think today is not the day to get that over the line, because we're not clear enough, I don't think, any of us, on what that looks like. So I would like to recommend that council request the Strategy and Advocacy Committee to workshop the Waitaki District Council commercial strategy presented at attachment 1 for it to come back to a future council. So is that clear enough on just make sure Arlene's got that. It's not very well wordsmithed there, sorry Arlene.
I'll pop it up on the screen.
Thank you. So in my view, this is going to probably just step us away from the rest of the recommendations in front of us, and it's just simplifying. And the next one, well, I think we'll leave the high level implementation. I think that's a date down the track, and I think at the moment we need to concentrate on getting the strategy over the line and sorted. And I just think there's been that many big things that we haven't really spent a whole lot of time in our own minds dwelling on this, because it's just not been, there's just been too much, would be my reading of where council's been at. So I guess for staff, because I know this is a frustrating pause for staff, but I think it's just a recognition that everything has moved so fast for so long, and this is actually really big, and we're just not feeling like we are a joined up enough team to really back it. So moving here, that we'll request the Strategy and Advocacy Committee to workshop the Waitaki District Council commercial strategy and come back to a future council meeting for adoption, I guess. Right, if I've moved that, do I have a seconder? Councillor McCone, what would your amendment like to be?
Well, I think we're always saying we need to get it done in a hurry, so I wonder if we shouldn't put a date on there. And as Alex said, you know, we're getting this September as the cut-off date for which direction we're going. So perhaps we should say by the end of September. That would be the only thing, rather than a date. Make it fit and make it get done, because it's going to be us, or that committee that actually sorts it. I don't know, but I'll leave that to Alex. I'm just thinking outside the square.
Mr. Palmer.
I'd just be concerned. We need to look at the work programme. So what is it we're going to ditch to do this? Because the work programme's pretty full. So putting a date on it without knowing the consequence of that for the other work that you've got planned, I'd just be cautious about that. Clearly, I'd love to get it back here as soon as possible in a shape that is acceptable to you. But until we can identify where this might fit, and is it one workshop, or are we going to need a number of workshops on this? I don't know.
I think we can feed back to councillors outside of this mix what that time frame could look like, but we need to spend a wee bit of time on it because it's not built into the programme at the moment, because we've got it in front of us for adoption, so there wasn't expected to be a whole lot more work on it. But I think we can recognise the timeliness around it, and we're the ones pushing pause a wee bit here, but it's not a stop. I just want to be really clear on that. Based on that, are you willing to second it as
I will second that on that basis.
Thank you, Councillor McCone. All right, so based on that, does anyone want to speak to that motion? Councillor Lewis.
I'd just like to say, can we ensure that report is condensed? I think it's quite important. I think we ultimately, when you go into something, you ask, the first question is, what are we trying to achieve? What's our goal? The second thing is, does this align with our goal, yes or no? And it's a relatively straightforward thing, and I think we overcomplicate things, quite honestly. So I'd just like to see that sort of condensed down to more of a high-level view that just directs the attention there, please.
Thank you. Councillor Schlack.
Not sure if this is correct, but I would like to suggest a small amendment to this motion. Request the Strategy and Ethics Committee to workshop the Waitaki District Council commercial strategy, taking into account the feedback that was raised during this particular council meeting, and that would pretty well cover, I think, also what Councillor Lewis has just mentioned.
I'm happy. We could just put taking into account feedback, just to.
It's also to try to limit actually how far to go with it. We've got a commercial strategy. I think general the feeling is we need a commercial strategy, We just need to refine this particular one so that we're all happy with it. So not to make it too broad. That's also my intent behind that.
Yeah, not back to the drawing board. So Councillor McCone, I'm happy with the taking into account feedback given at this meeting. You're happy with that? Perfect. Councillor Cowles.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I guess one of my questions, that we did have around that was, the deliverability around people. And on page 19, the next steps, if adopted, officers will assign overall accountability for delivery, confirm workstream owners, establish commercial governance and reporting cadence, and begin detailed implementation planning. Immediate priorities will include establishing the commercial governance framework. I guess for me, the next step seems quite detailed there. In the sense of what work streams we do have to do, but I'd like to know what impact that has on our overall work when it does come back as part of that workshop. So for me, it would just be interesting to understand how this does fit in. I've sort of heard that it's meant to be high level and just slot in, but there does seem to be some contradictory sort of information in the report that there seems to be still quite a bit of work to be done. So it'd be nice to know, how much work this will take to put into place. But outside of that, happy with the motion. I guess the only other thing to note from my point of view is that as we work through our PAR workshops, if we don't have this in place, that we just bear in mind that we do have the bones of a commercial strategy there that we need to be paying some attention to.
All right, so if everyone's comfortable with the resolution, we've got a mover and a seconder, so I will put that. All in favour, please say aye. And against, that's carried. And now we'll move on to, how are we doing for time? Thank you very much, Catherine, for your work on this, and I know it's been a bit of a tough journey, and I think you're just seeing a slightly overwhelmed council with everything going on, and we've got we want to turn our attention to this and do it well. So thank you for your time. We do appreciate it.
That's all right, and thanks for the feedback. Take it on board.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Now we'll ask Ken to come up, and we're going to move on to the risk appetite, which is page number 76. Richard or Ken, who wants to?
Thank you, Mayor Mel. Just while Ken and Victoria get set up. So this is our risk appetite statement. It's broadly speaking setting the levers and dials for our risk appetite across key categories. So it's sort of the, like the general backstop of where council is positioned from its risk appetite. So high or low, we're pretty modest in our risk appetite, which is, I think, pretty fair for our sort of organisation. Ken, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ken. I'm the Risk and Insurance Advisor for Council. The purpose of today's report is to seek approval for the risk appetite statements. In practical terms, the statement answers two general questions. How much risk Council would normally is prepared to carry in pursuing its objectives, and when does a risk need to move beyond routine management into stronger treatment, escalation, assurance, or formal decision-making. Council already has a risk management policy explaining how risks are identified and governed. What has been missing is a clearly defined appetite for strategic and organizational risks. The statement fills the gap and provides the governance threshold for deciding whether residual risk remains within what Council would normally tolerate. The proposed profile is cautious but pragmatic. Council would have a low or minimalist appetite for financial risks, people and health and safety risks, and legislative and regulatory risks. These are areas where material failure can create unacceptable affordability impacts, harm to people, statutory failure, or enforcement action. Council would have a medium or cautious appetite for commercial investment, service delivery, reputation and relationships, environmental, and data and systems. A medium appetite does not mean relaxed controls or unrestricted risk-taking. It means Council may accept moderate risks only where the long-term benefit is clear, the uncertainty is understood, controls are reliable, accountability is clear, and the activity remains lawful. No category has been assigned high or very high. The most important point now is that risk appetite is not a stop work instruction. When risk is outside appetite, council is not saying do not proceed. What council is saying is that exposure is outside what we would normally tolerate and manage, so it needs more visibility and something further needs to be done. That may mean stronger controls, additional safeguards, further evidence or independent assurance, a revised scope, staged delivery, clearer accountabilities, enhanced monitoring, or escalation to governance. Council may still proceed, but it should do so deliberately, transparently, and with a governance response proportionate to the exposure. The further the risk sits outside appetite, the stronger required response is. When we say we accept the risks, it means the risk needs to be understood carefully. Formal acceptance does not mean council is comfortable with the risk, but it endorses it as desirable or consider it acceptable as ordinary business as usual. Risk acceptance also cannot authorize non-compliance. It cannot approve breaches of legislation, regulation, any consent conditions, delegations, health and safety duties, privacy obligations, or mandatory council policies. The Risk Appetite Workshop last 2nd of June 2026 established preferred appetite settings. The work completed afterwards was to incorporate the additional direction from elected members and translate those settings into practical guardrails. 4 post-workshop refinements were added. First, the financial risk appetite remains low, while an additional commercial and investment appetite risk was added and separated to set out and has been set out as medium. This allows council to consider commercial opportunities without weakening core controls around affordability, debt, rates, cash flow, and potential loss. Both appetites will be applied together. A commercially worthwhile proposal may still need staging, limits, and safeguards, or explicit governance consideration if the financial downside is too great. Second, the service delivery statement now expressly addresses potential rates capping, changes to levels of service, organizational capacity, accountability, and productivity. A medium appetite allows managed change to services, timing, and methods. It, however, does not support committing to more work or service than what council can realistically deliver. Third, people, health and safety, and data and systems statements now considers frequency, recurrence, patterns, and near misses. Individual minor incidents may be outside appetite where they show weakening of controls or the normalization of avoidable harm or disruption. Fourth, environmental risk is set at medium but remains constrained by a low legislative and regulatory compliance appetite. Moderate, reversible, and well-managed environmental effects may be considered where the long-term effect is positive, but not where the approach relies on unlawful activity, consent breach, or unmanaged statutory exposure. Where several risks apply, the more conservative appetite normally governs. Together, these refinements make the escalation and oversight expectations much clearer. The statements have been developed through alignment with existing policies and strategies, consultation with ELT, managers and team leads, subject matter experts, and elected members. The workshop outcome were then used to refine the settings and strengthen the practical guidance. The preferred option is to approve the risk appetite statements as presented. Approval of the risk appetites will not approve any individual project, investments, service change, or environmental effect. Those decisions will still need to meet their own statutory, financial, and governance requirements. What this statement provides is a common language, a clear threshold for escalation, and greater consistency in how council considers risks and benefit. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Ken. Does anyone have any questions for Ken? Councillor Thelman.
Yeah, I endorse this. It's really good. I think any time we step outside those risk appetites, we need to have some, need to do something about it to mitigate it, or we'll take a closer look at whatever the particular issue is. So it's good to have a definition of where that needs to happen, and below that where sort of can get on with business, because you could be as low risk as you like, but and you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. So it's important to accept a certain amount of risk, and as Councillor Lewis said earlier, then when we're dealing with other people's money, we obviously have to have a low tolerance for it, and to be prudent. So yeah, I'll endorse it, and if there's no further questions, I'll be happy to move it as well.
I'll take that as a notice of motion. I'll come back to you on that. Councillor Slack.
Thank you. Through the chair, Ken, well done. This is something that has been discussed at length and debated at length, if I can remember correctly, in the workshop. If I endorse it as well, so if Councillor Felning is moving it, then I'm happy to second it, and thank you, Ken.
All right, so I'll take that as a move, Councillor Felning, seconded Councillor Schlack. Do just want to echo the comments. There's been a lot of work on this, and appreciate the role we've taken in this, Ken. It's been, I think, a helpful walkthrough for all of us. Is there any other comments anyone wants before I put this? No, so just going to the recommendations that we've got moved here. 1, approves the attached risk appetite statement, approves the following risk appetite positions, which are all listed, notes that risks outside of their appetite will be actively treated, escalated, formally accepted where appropriate, and reported through the relevant management and governance channels, and note that it does not authorise non-compliance with legislation, regulation, consent conditions, delegations, health and safety duties, privacy, or mandatory council policies. So I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Thank you very much. And done well in time that we can break for a morning tea break. We will be back online at 10:45. So thank you, everyone. All right, welcome back everyone, and we are now moving on to page 109, which is the Waitaha Canterbury Regional Spatial Plan Committee draft terms of reference, and I'll pass on to Mr. Campbell, I'm guessing, to open this one.
Thank you, Mayor Mel. Just before I get into this item, just on behalf of the planning team, I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Hopkins' contribution to planning. He was pretty passionate about that topic. I think as a governor, he delved into some of the expert and opinions on planning, but that was always welcome, and he was up for a good debate and challenge on planning matters, and was always looking sort of forward in what was coming. So that was always entertaining. We had some good stoushes in the chambers on things, and also afterwards he'd come and have a chat too, which was really appreciated. So yeah, just like to acknowledge that. Okay, this paper is kind of a bit of a repeat of what we've already seen in terms of the Otago and to some extent Canterbury spatial plan set up from the governance level. At office level, work is already underway, and certainly Alex has also been involved in the CE forums for Canterbury and Otago and getting this, I guess, bridging the gap with the governance and officer work streams. With the recently released Environment Select Committee report back on the Planning Bill and Natural Environment Bill, we have a bit of a clearer steer on how this will look. I understand they're going through Parliament this week and next week for enactment quite soon. So by then it'll be fairly set what we'll be dealing with. In the meantime, interim arrangements need to be made because we still have a fairly tight time frame. It's all up around 21 months to get these notified, which doesn't leave us very long when you consider how big they are. And certainly for Otago, we're probably slightly more advanced with a meeting coming up next week, which Councillor Thelning and I will probably attend that on behalf of Waitaki. For Canterbury, a template report was prepared, which this is largely based on, and is just going through the key things that are required to get that set up, particularly around resourcing and authorisations for the reps on the committee. So it's kind of a bit of a mechanical process we're going through now to work through this. As noted, we already have Councillor Thelning as our rep for the Canterbury Committee. They have asked for an alternate, which I haven't got a name for yet, but we can cover that today if need be. And with the funding there and split, this is a standard funding split that we're used to with Canterbury projects, and our share is within the budget available. I think I pointed out we've got just over 30,000 remaining after we pay our Otago share this financial year. So the 28-odd thousand required for Canterbury fits within that budget amount. And obviously staff time, we will do our best to cover these. We have a range of staff helping in the Otago space, both infrastructure, planning and other policy areas. So it's kind of spreading across all parts of council that will be involved at the initial phase. One of the key timing issues for us will be around getting through the plan hearings this year, and then that will free up a little bit more staff time to devote to this project going forward, which should work fine if we can keep on track. So yeah, happy to answer any questions, but I think we're well on the way. We've obviously got Councillor Thelning there covering us for now, but happy to talk through any questions or further representation that's required.
No, thank you, Mr. Campbell. And I think this is a good example of, obviously we're doing this again across two regions, which I think has been well canvassed by us, but need to keep that very much part of the conversations moving forward around Head Start, and that we need to be doing this in one region, not in two regions. That being said, with the directions and decisions we've made, this is probably remains an important piece of work for Waitaki, and could well be the future direction that we do take as well. So making sure we have got enough people or expertise in front of us based on a last minute text, and I'm sorry for the late conversation on this one, Brent, but I'm going to suggest that we add Councillor Cowles as our second councillor on that space. Whether you're comfortable with that, Councillor Cowles, I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, no, I'm comfortable with this. It's something that I've had a brief discussion with Sven about this process during some of our phone calls. So yeah, more than happy to put my hand up for that one. Thanks.
No, that's great. So yeah, I will just take questions for now. I've been a bit lax in my chairing, so we'll go back to questions first at the moment, and we can take comments once we've got a recommendation on the table. So, Councillor McCone.
Just a few questions. It says, well, in the recommendation, have we already funded out 30,000? And then on number 4, it goes to a funding share split of 3.9%. Is that the setup cost that we're still up for, or is that included in what's already talked about in number 3?
Yes, thank you, Councillor McCone. So the funding amount in recommendation 3 is within the remaining budget of just over 30,000. So we already have a budget in this year's plan for it. So we'll keep within that. And that's represents the 3.9% of the overall setup cost for this year. Yep. So we haven't agreed any future funding other than under 4, the funding split. I would note, though, just picking up the Mayor's comment, that in the amended planning bill, a council that is in 2 or more regions may opt out of one. We might want to just take our time to think about that once we know a bit more about Head Start and where that might land. Also, we do have roughly 50% of the district is in each region, so it's quite a big chunk of each part of the district. So we have to be careful if we were going to opt out. But yeah, there'll be time to consider that once we know a bit more about Head Start outcomes, because we'll obviously be contributing to Otago as well. So.
And just more out of curiosity than anything else, so alternative do any of the representatives have to or must be a councillor, or can they be appointed by the district to actually sit on this board? I'm just for clarification.
That might be a question for the CEO potentially on that. I think it is requiring a elected member rep, because that's the way the legislation is framed, to have people from the council involved. There are others that are members of the committee around iwi, etc., and maybe a Crown appointment as well.
Yeah, just confirming it envisages an elected member representative appointed.
Right, is there any other questions, councillors? Councillor Schlack.
Yeah, thanks, David, through the chair. Just point 8 notes the next decision for council. The approval of the process agreement. When is that likely going to come? Is that particularly in relation to Head Start decision?
Thank you, Councillor Schlack. My understanding is that once the committee meets, they will consider the process agreement. That will then need to come back for councils to, I guess, ratify once they've, I guess, not workshopped it, but traversed it as a committee to iron out any issues, and then hopefully they can say to each respective council they represent, yes, we're happy with the agreement, subject to whatever changes are made, so that you don't end up with a perverse outcome where the committee's happy with it, but each council's not. So we kind of need to make sure the council reps are going to bat for us on that. But I think it's a more an administrative agreement that covers off how they're going to operate.
I'm not sure you actually answered my question. I mean, it basically, what point A says that there is another decision to be made by this council. Where I'm going with this, I'm a little bit concerned, sitting across 2 of these regions, then throwing in the mix the whole Head Start process, which hopefully we get some sort of indication of next month, September. my concern is that we do not commit, because I see bigger figures further down the line. So it's not just this relatively small fee about share funding that we are committing to, but are we actually committing ourselves to much larger costs further down the track in either Otago or Canterbury or both? So do we have the ability, when this next decision is coming from council, to make a decision as in we either going to follow the one or the other rather than both of them?
Yes, I mean, the process agreement will need to come back from each regional committee. At this stage, we only have budget for this financial year. We need to feed in any budgets for the LTP. But again, once we're in that stage, we'll know a bit more about Head Start, where we're at. So I think we need to just step through it carefully in terms of, are we going to split across the 2 regions, or are we going to go with one? But it will come back to council, that process agreement.
Just to be clear, we are not committing to any larger further contribution to either of these plans, either Otago's or Canterbury.
Yeah, well, we do commit to the funding percentage as it's proportionate to each size of the district, but if we opt out, then we would not be paying that.
Can I just add to that? So legislation commits us to this process of doing spatial planning. And you'll see in the report there's an estimated cost for the whole process for Canterbury of 7 to 9 million. I understand there's not a great deal of science behind that, so that figure may be larger, it may be smaller. At the moment, it is proposed that Environment Canterbury funds the majority of the costs of that through debt funding. However, we need to be conscious that Environment Canterbury has not agreed to that as yet. So I can't say honestly now that there won't be more costs coming back to us for both the Otago and the Canterbury processes that we're legally obliged to go through. So it's something to keep an eye on. I think it's a good question to ask, but we don't have the answer to that yet at this moment. But what we do know is we have to commit to this process, and we've got a very short time frame to do it.
And I think just to expand on that a wee touch, the Head Start, and obviously that's a whether or not that happens kind of space, they have said that they are willing to basically revisit that kind of discussion through the process, because it is obviously a legislative requirement at the moment. So there's a wee bit of water under the bridge. We need to understand if we're in that process, and we need to make sure the Head Start process does include those question marks and say that we want to continue to work on that, so that we put a bit of a wedge in the door, if you will, so when it comes to what we can revisit that. So that's the work we need to do in the background at the moment. We still need to basically stand things up to meet the legislation, but you would hope that with that kind of potential for a reprieve through the Head Start process that we can work our way through. So I think probably in particular for us, the Looking South ones, what happens if we're signing something and is there an off-ramp or something like that that's particular to Waitaki around this. So I think that needs to work through in the detail. You're looking confused.
No, I'm just going to be a little bit cheeky here, because it's one heck of a conversation, something to consider if Waiima would go the other way.
Yeah. Which is exactly why I think, taking Mr. Campbell's point, we can't afford to make any knee-jerk decisions at this stage. We need to let a wee bit of water go under the bridge first. Councillor Lewis, then Councillor Thowning, then Councillor McCone, I think it was.
Thanks, Mayor Tavendale. I just had a quick question. I do support that we need to do this and need to move forward. It was just raising the point that Mr. Palmley raised about debt funding with ECAN. What happens to that debt if ECAN is no longer there? Where does that share? Do we suddenly wind up with that element coming towards us?
Obviously, that would be something to sort out through the process of unitarisation, but I think it's a fair assumption that that debt would then be carried proportionately between those new unitary authorities.
Councillor Thowning.
Yeah, I think this is our highest level document that we get to have a direct say over, so it is critical to do it, and it's not ideal, but to continue the 2 region trying to do both at the same time thing is, I believe, appropriate at the moment. But I note from our district plan there was some debt funding of that plan as well. Is it usual to debt fund these plans, and does the debt then link to the life of the plan?
So the first part, yeah, it's common for councils to fund, you know, some of these plans in that way, because putting it all on the ratepayer in, you know, 1 or 2 years, and particularly with the spatial plan, we've got 2 years to develop it. So putting it all on the ratepayer in 1 or 2 years for a plan that's got a, you know, a long lifetime wouldn't be a good way of doing it. What the second part of the question was? Sorry.
So once it is debt funded, is it then linked to the lifetime of the plan, so the debt's gone by the time you've got to do the next one?
It probably varies between different councils. I'm not sure of our approach here, whether we link it to the lifetime of the plan or not. I think Dave is nodding, so we do. Yeah.
All right, Councillor McCone.
I think it's been answered, I'm not quite sure, but we do need it. It's a new RMA coming through with a whole lot of new rules, so we need to be there, and we just must be part of it. It's just the funding thing, it's just my Scottish brain working. It says at the top of page 114, the estimated cost of establishment could be between 7 and 10 million bucks. But then it goes further down the page and says the annual cost on a percentage base of 3.9% will be $54,000 a year, roughly. What I'm asking is how much of that $10 million do we have defined for the establishment program?
So we don't know at this stage. So go back to my comment earlier that the proposal at the moment is that the majority of that 7 to 9 million is funded by ECAN through debt funding, but ECAN has not agreed, Environment Canterbury has not agreed to that yet. So there is a risk that that comes back for us to sort out.
Right, just for sake of... David?
Just, yeah, thanks. Just quickly, I mean, the numbers are large and quite high level. It may be further refined because the scope of the regional spatial plan's been refined as well in the planning bill. So we would hope that that number would drop. It's pretty big, 7 to 10 million. But yeah.
Councillor Fowler.
Yeah, I'll move it once there's no further questions that we accept those with Councillor Cowles inserted into that, whichever number it was, to be the backup. There is a big cost to this, but given the stated aims of the government through this planning reform, there's huge opportunity. They want to reduce the number of consents that you need to do things out there that are productive. So this is a huge opportunity. I'm confident it'll outweigh this cost, and so I'm happy to move that we move in this direction.
Thank you. So moved by Councillor Thowning. I wonder whether Councillor Cowles is comfortable with that and willing to second it.
Yeah, I'll be happy to second it. Thank you.
Right, so now I will take speakers. Councillor McCone.
I just wonder if an amendment would be appropriate to put a timeline on it, reviewed within a 12-month period or every 12-month period, so we know where we're going and what it's costing.
What number are you talking here, Councillor McCone?
I think we need another number 9.
What I might do is leave as they are and see if you want to move something afterwards. I do have a concern that the timeframes are not for council to play with all that much at the moment. But how about we work through these ones and then we get a number 9 on the box.
You know, all I'm trying to do is protect us from a sinkhole of money going down, and just we keep paying, and so we can actually have control over what we're actually paying into.
Mr. Palmer, do you have a comment?
So, I mean, at this stage, yeah, the financial commitment is clear in there. If that was to go beyond that, that would need to come back to council for a further decision. And at this stage, we're just in the setup phase, so we don't know what the programme looks like in detail at this stage, what the detailed costs are. So this enables all of that work to be done, and then that will be coming back to councils, in particular when we know the position of Environment Canterbury in terms of what their position is in the funding.
I wonder
So
if
it will come back, and we can also provide updates in the regular reports to council as well.
Would it be the number 4 where outside of the actual share of the funding which is named, it just mentions a 3.9 share split for the overall development? I guess that's probably the one that doesn't have a time frame per se of the 12 months. Number 4 there. So number 4, we say approves its funding share split of 3.9% funding of the overall development and delivery. That's probably where there is something that does tie council much further past just the 12 months because it's a bit open-ended.
I don't think that's committing you to expenditure at this stage. That's just saying we're sticking with the existing way that Canterbury costs are split at the moment. So when something comes back to you, it would be on the basis that it's that 3.9% split. But if it requires additional funding, additional expenditure above what you've agreed there, it would need to come back for agreement.
I wonder whether we want to just expand on that number 4 somewhat, just to clarify that, but additional funding outside of what's approved in number 3 will come back to council for approval, or something.
Say that's the default. We can't spend beyond what you've agreed. We can spend, if the budget's not agreed, we can't spend it, so we'd have to come back. And if it gives you some assurance to put it in there, we can.
But we have. I'm just trying to message. I get what you're saying, but I do worry when it just says straight number 4 approves its funding share split of 3.9% of funding for the overall development and delivery. So, Mr. Campbell.
I wonder if we could just put at the end there, subject to LTP, agreement or whatever we need to put in there, just so it's locked into the future LTP, because we'd have to consider it for both Otago and Canterbury, as well as the resourcing we might need internally to deliver. Just going back to Councillor McCone's point, I think number 8 gives us that circle back round for the next council consideration anyway, ahead of that'll be within 12 months. But maybe that item 4 just notes the kind of LTP constraints, because all councils will have that same issue to deal with.
Yeah. Mr. Cook, did you want to add to that?
Just to clarify, I think the Chief Executive explained number 4 that 3.9% is how costs are divvied up when ECAN just do work, or the group within ECAN councils do work, and then that is our portion. So my understanding would be that that's been agreed through the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, etc., and therefore I'm not sure that we can change that too much, because that's already been agreed at a different level. So what we're doing there is suggesting that that is the way forward on this particular piece of work.
I think just that what we're trying to clarify here is not the question on the 3.9 split. What it is saying that number 4, when you read it by itself, does look like it does basically make a decision on the overall funding that will do that. Like, I think there just needs to be a counter on that this is not going to be operating outside of our decision making. It is the way that the amount that comes back down to council for approval is calculated, but it's not a decision making line on its own.
As a suggestion, I think it more appropriately sit with 3, that you Waitaki District Council share of funding, and then the amount in there for the establishment phase of Waitaki Canterbury Regional Spatial Plan, with any additional funding requirements to be brought back to council. And then it just clarifies that you're not going to spend above that. I mean, that's the default position, but it just clarifies that if there is more requirement than that $28,294.50, 50 cents is important in that, then it's brought back to council.
And number 4, I'm just teasing this out, make sure we've got it right. Number 4 wouldn't be able to be taken by itself without referring to number 3, or do you need to refer 4 to number 3? Do you get what I'm saying? or does it operate by itself?
So 4 is just confirming the current approach to the split of funding within Canterbury. It doesn't commit you to any expenditure at all. It's just saying that if there is additional expenditure that's required, or there will be additional expenditure that's required, when it's looking at the split, that's the basis on which it will come back to you currently. So that it'd be, you know, whatever the cost is, it'll be 3.9% for Waitaki is what would come back to council for consideration.
Now, just checking with the mover and the seconder, are we comfortable with where we've landed?
Yeah, I'm happy with that, and if it helps John, we could also change number 4 from approves its funding share split to notes its funding share split. Might more accurately refer to what Alex is saying there. It's not approving funding, but it notes the arrangement that's in place that led to the number 3.
Yeah, I'll be happy with that.
Just wondering if staff, that's a comfortable outcome? Yep, okay. So right, we've got the mover and seconder on that one. I'm going to go to Councillor McCone, then Councillor Lewis.
I suppose I'm not sure whether I made myself clear or not, but 3.9% on $1 million is 39,000, and on 10 million is different. And the wording there says overall development and delivery of the Waitahuna spatial plan. It doesn't have so you could develop it over 10 years or you could deliver it over 10 years. There is no finite end to that, which we could be funding $10,000 or 10 million. That's what I'm trying to do, is protect the difference.
I guess to respond to that, this is a long-term work program, and we're going to have to keep, whether it's council as it lands now or a future setup of council, is going to need to fund an ongoing work program, and that what we're not doing outside of the 3.9% is approving any additional funding outside that 28,000 at the moment, and anything does need to come back to us for approval. So I get what you're saying, but the reality is a 10+ year work program, and it will come back every year, and there will be a cost to it.
Forgive me for being cynical.
Not cynical, I'd say you're hanging out in reality. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. Number 4 again. I'm just wondering whether we actually note that it's capped at 3.9%. My concern, the reason for that is that if somebody else decides that they're going to pull out, theoretically, that increases our share.
Well, then it would need to come back to us, I think, because when we have mentioned the 3.9 split, anything higher than that would need to come back to council.
Yeah, so on this particular piece of work, someone can't decide to pull out. They're legally obliged to do it. They're legally obliged to work with us and others in Canterbury to do it, so that they can't pull out of it. And you can say it's capped, but it also is the baseline. It is 3.9%, and you know, the other councils will be going through a process of agreeing, you know, their percentage amounts as well. And notwithstanding all of that, anything above that, you know, 28,000 still needs to come back to council for decision, because we haven't got authorisation to spend more than that.
And Councillor Fallon, did you have your hand up? Nope. All right, well, I think we have landed somewhere. So if everyone's relatively comfortable, if there's any other questions or comments. No, well, I've put that. So I'm going to put them all together unless anyone wants them put separately. No, okay, so I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye.
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 And against? That's carried. Councillor McCone abstained. Everyone else that is present voted for. Right, so now we move on to the draft coastal hazards and resilience strategy. I'll give you the number of page at the moment, 125. Okay, so Richard or Victoria, I'll pass it to you to...
Thank you, Mayor Mel. Just while Victoria gets ready as well. So we're looking for council's support on 2 items today, the Coastal Hazards and Resilience Strategy and the statement of proposal for that. The goal is to release this to the community so we can get some feedback on it. The strategy itself are the document's fairly long, so there's a few key things in it. The strategic framework, which helps inform our decisions and any discussions we have about these sorts of resilience challenges. It also calls out some, I guess you'd call them high-risk areas and what the current thinking is around them. And then there's some details on how we wish to take the proposal forward. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. So, just building on Richard's introduction, we've had a couple of workshops with the Strategy Advocacy Committee on the subject since April. We're working through some work that was developed in late 2024, so building on that work that the Council commissioned Becca to do. That was in conjunction with a lot of key stakeholders in the coastal area, including tangata whenua representatives. So, yeah, it's essentially taking that work and building on that, and the framework we've got in place within the strategy really guides council's conservation and investment decisions on the coast. So, we've got 70 kilometres of coastline in Waitaki, and there's already evidence that sea level rise and erosion and coastal erosion are affecting where people live, work and travel. So the draft strategy sets out a recommended direction for 12 key sites that have been identified based on the evidence based from the Becca report. But it also provides that framework for going into the future in terms of where we need to consider new hotspots that might pop up along the coastline. Yeah, so I mean, without a strategy like this, there's a risk that council's forced into rushed and costly decisions. So I don't really have too much more to add really at the moment. I'm really happy to take questions on the framework or anything. All I want to say is, sorry, I just did meant to mention that the consultation is a very big part of this. So this is a phase one. This is a phase one strategy. Phase two will be getting into more the details in terms of implementation. So it's kind of scheduled for November to April. And staff have been working with the comms team to develop a plan for community engagement in the space. We've got a couple of drop-in sessions planned for Oamaru and Hamden in early September. And then we will work with key stakeholders and interested parties through the implementation phase, which is going to be a little bit more detailed, looking at things like trigger points and actions we will need to take at some point when those triggers are hit at these high risk areas. So happy to take questions. Thanks.
Thank you. So, councillors, we will start in the question space. Councillor Slack.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. We've discussed this at length at workshops, so I'm not gonna revisit all that. That's what the committees are for, in my view. I do have a question, though, particularly around the Hamden Cemetery. Are we still using that at the moment? Because if relocation is going to be where we are going to go with this, then we really should be looking, in my view, as in, do we continue using it as a cemetery or a burying place? And yeah, that is the question.
Thanks, Councillor Schlack. So in the appendice, there's a little bit more information on these key sites, and we do identify that if we agree on this approach of managed retreat, that we will cease burials at that point, or soon after. Obviously, in conjunction with communication with families and the cemeteries and the like. But the intent is that if we pursue that direction, we will need to make that call going forward. Correct.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, is there any other questions? Councillor McCone.
Yeah, thank you for this, Victoria. I'm just a couple of queries on page 127. You've got your summary of recommended directions. The first one, that's a no-brainer. I totally agree with that, just managed retreat. Could you tell me what the status quo is? And the second part of that, the rock intervention, those three items, Kiwi Rail, Kariki Beach and the main South Line, none of them have anything to do with us. It's a national thing, as in roading and in rail, so therefore should they actually be in the consultation document?
Thanks for that, Councillor McCone. I'm just clarifying, are you looking at the detailed action plan for site, the Kariki site, or the, I don't have exact numbers here, am I? Which we're actually referring to with the status quo example?
It's the draft coastal hazards and resilience strategy at the top of page 127. That's of any help.
Generically, status quo means what we're doing at the moment. So my numbers don't quite line up with your. But in terms of the sites we're talking about that are not controlled by council, we've got a number of sites in the strategy that are not, that council does not have direct control over. But what we're saying is that we don't have the ability to develop action plans for those sites, but we can recommend or advocate to the agencies, this is the approach we think is probably best for those sites. So for example, at the moment, there's a lot of rock protection going out along Oamaru Central here with the rail yard. That's based on the evidence through the Becker report, that's the best approach at the moment.
Sorry, my point is who's funding it and who's paying for it?
So there's nothing in here about funding, and their strategy funding will come later, but the strategy is saying that it's focusing on where council has the most direct control over sites.
I think I get it.
Yeah, I think just to clarify, we're not tying council up for anything, but I think we have tried to look at this as a Waitaki-wide conversation so that some points of this aren't going to be, hey, this is a council problem and for council to deal with, but I do think council has a role in the advocacy space. So if there's something that's not being done by someone else that owns it, whether that's someone like Kiwi Rail or NZTA or the like, it's basically saying we as a community do hold that important and gives us, I can see you shaking here, gives us as a council the ability, while we're already up in those meetings in Wellington for different things, to say, hey, and by the way, this road's falling into the sea and that's important to us. How do we go about getting some funding for that? And it doesn't need to be something that council is funding, but I do think that we have a leadership role here. Deputy Mayor Ryan and then Councillor Fanini Titi.
Thank you. I guess I was just wondering if you could talk through the communications approach on this, given that it is quite a difficult one it's taken some time for us to get our heads around and, to make sure that we're getting the best feedback from the community, helping them to understand. Just interested in the approach there.
Thanks for that question. This is really important in terms of the communication. So, I guess this is the phase one is the higher level, right? And phase two is when it gets into more detail, when we really will need to engage in depth with affected parties, individual property owners, if relevant, tangata whenua, the like. So the opportunity in phase one really is we've got some drop-in sessions where people can come along and ask the questions, sort of a couple of weeks in advance of when the strategy consultation closes. That's I guess, for the first stage is where they can get that sort of talk to SMEs and sort of matter experts and the like around any questions they might have. So everyone that was involved in the initial work through Becker, so all those external stakeholders, most of them, in terms, the likes of Ministry of Education, Kiwi Rail, NZTA and the like, have all been advised that the strategy is coming to them next week, assuming it's adopted by council. So everyone that was involved in that initial work has been, given the heads up. The drop-in sessions will be an opportunity for people to come along and ask questions. And then the phase two approach we'll work out in more detail a little bit later, but that's going to be a lot more in depth. And it may just maybe one-on-one conversations, it may be focus groups. We've yet to confirm exactly how that's going to roll out. depending on the interest and, you know, with the phase one with strategy.
Councillor Fanini Tahiti.
Yeah, no, thank you through the chair. Yeah, I think everyone has now said what I was going to actually say, and Deputy Mayor had talked about the community consultation approach is quite important, and I think throughout the workshops that we were landing on in a space that it was really important to go out to the community early, that we included the private owners that are still residents, and even though, you know, like it's not something that council will propose to pay money for necessarily, but it's important to inform them about what the options are and what the discussion is. So I think the whole principle of this is to go out early, seek their the views of the community, and then just kind of work through that process so we can help shape and help inform what the next stage would be. So there's no funding or any resourcing or for any projects confirmed. It's just at this stage just getting the views of the community, and then just acknowledging Councillor McCone's gatekeeping style in terms of advocating for the community. It's right, you're rightly so. But I think through this we can try and seek all of the diverse views from the community to try and look at what the next steps would be. And we've got some good time as well. You mentioned from November until April. So yeah, no, I'm supportive of this. When we're ready to move, I'm happy to move.
Councillor Schlack.
Yes, certainly supportive of this, but just picking up a bit more about the communication and the consultation with the public, and I'm going to look right across the whole room here, because I think we need to keep in mind that the families over many, many years might have very well dispersed over the whole of New Zealand and possibly the world. So I think that has to be taken account. I am very supportive to start this process ASAP, because I think we cannot just rely on one drop-in session. I'm not saying that that was your intention, Victoria. We need to basically saturate this, as in so people have been given every opportunity to understand what is going to happen with the Hamden Cemetery. Yeah, other than fully support this, and I want to thank Victoria, I want to make the point, yeah, the workshops and the communications that we've had online and here in the chamber have been great. Really appreciate it over that. Thank you.
Councillor Fowling.
Likewise, I'm very supportive of this. It's long-term thinking, which is something we could do with a lot more of, particularly when it comes to these assets that are close to the core. We've got aerials going back to the 1950s, and you only need to talk to people that went to, say, Waitaki Boys back then to see how much the coast is shifting, and then you look at how close some of these assets are to it now. We need to start thinking now. So to John's point, if we can plan now, it'll be cheaper to plan over the next 100 years and to get to that point, and then suddenly that generation's got a big problem to deal with. Yeah, I fully support this going out to consultation, because then we can learn a lot more about some of the unforeseen things out there on private properties as well. So this will be a good service, this Becker report as well, to everyone who owns property up and down the coast, to look at their own assets as well and start thinking about their own plans as well. So it's, yeah, I'm supportive of this and happy to second it.
All right, so I've got a mover in Councillor Fanini Tahiti, a seconder in Councillor Thowning, who asked a really good question there. Sorry, being cheeky on that one. So we will open up for comments, and I just want to say it has been a really good piece of work. This is important stuff, but I think we need to be really mindful that this is, for people that are directly affected, a really challenging conversation. So I think just remaining really sympathetic in the way we go about this, particularly, and by Councillor Schlack's point around the Hamden Cemetery, for me that's the one thing that sits on my shoulders a wee bit, where I say, you know, that is of particular sensitivity for a community, and we need to just be really mindful how we deal with that. And I think, as Councillor Schlack said, just making sure, outside of drop-in sessions, which I think are really important, how do we make sure we do that part of the conversation well, because that's a really tough one. And it's also got to be fair, front page headlines sitting all over it for anything that we step wrongly, and probably quite rightly, to be in that space, because people do, you know, we all feel really strongly about our loved ones and the people that we've lost along the way, and that laying to rest, there's a huge amount in our culture on that we need to be mindful of. So I think just we need to keep probably coming back and just touching back into our conversations to say, have we got this right, and have we done enough to be sensitive in that space, and to be planning for the future, but also going, how do we look after the past and that. So that's probably the one thing that holds, sits on my shoulders a wee bit, that and those that are losing land or livelihoods through some of the things and what our decisions mean for them. So just want to keep that sensitivity really high on our radar. I'm going to take Councillor Schlack, then Councillor McCone, then Councillor Thowning.
Sorry, just a thought came to my mind, and through the chair, Victoria, the drop-in sessions that you are suggesting or proposing, are they primarily focused around to get people in and ask questions? And of course, questions will be expected to be answered, and I don't think we're quite ready for the answers yet. So is that my understanding? The drop-in sessions, people can come ask the questions, and we can learn from the questions and then formulate answers later, because I don't think at the moment we're even in a stage to answer any questions.
It's Councillor Schlack. That's the intent of them, is just to question any questions people might have. Acknowledge we may not be able to answer everything straight away. Otago Regional Council are going to be present, which is fantastic. They've been great support through that, and we'll have 2 or 3 other council staff in attendance. Absolutely welcome any other elected member support through those as well. So it's the 1st of September in Oamaru and the 3rd of September in Hemden are the 2 planned at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor McCone.
I think getting out there for community consultation is important, and it goes back to Sven's comments before that proactive is better than reactive, and if we can plan ahead, the benefits will far outweigh the negatives. I think it's also important that you look after what is yours, be it private or individual, and that's where you focus your attention on. So take that as you'd like it. My only other question as part of that would be, how involved is ORC in amongst all this? Are they following us right through from where to go? Or is there financial consideration? Are they helping with all the research and everything else? And where are they going to be further down the track in that scenario?
Thanks for the question. ORC have been involved through our working group through this, so particularly the natural hazards side of the council. So John Luke was, I think, at the last workshop that we had with the Strategy Advocacy Committee. In terms of funding, no, there's been no involvement in terms of the funding side of it, but I think a big important part of the OIC is actually the monitoring side, and they are doing some work to develop a good monitoring program along the coast. So I think this would work really well with that. So we can actually benefit from that longer term monitoring to help us plan for the future as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Thowning.
Yeah, another thing that comes to mind is there's a lot of other burial sites up and down the coast as well. They're in the firing line, which are not under our control, and so this will be useful to form some thinking for those groups too. For the Hampden Cemetery, I was just wondering how complete our records are and how, so what proportion, if any, if we've looked into it so far, what proportion of those sites have we been able to trace or still have contacts for in order to have some direct consultation and notification?
Thanks, Councillor Thowning. I don't have that detail to hand, but definitely can work with the the old parks team in terms of the cemetery records and the like. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Councillor Thurling just asked the question I was going to ask, and that's been answered. Thank you.
No worries. Right, so we do have a mover and a seconder. Is that everything, councillors? Right, so I'm going to put that. Are we happy to put them both together? Right, so all in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That's carried. Thank you very much for all the work involved in this. It's there's been a lot involved, and there's still a lot of work still to do. But I really appreciate what's happened in this space. Right, so now we'll move on to well, we don't have the placeholder that we had for the consideration of a Head Start proposal. Just to update on that one, we are waiting for a proposal to come through. Maybe today, is that still maybe? We're a bit unsure on the time frame around that, which is why it hasn't met the meeting today. We will be having an extraordinary council meeting online on Friday afternoon, so hoping to have that joint document, which is being drafted by a consultant that's not directly been contracted by any individual council, so that there's a wee bit of I guess, yeah, ability to look across the whole lot rather than one individual council holding the pen. So that will come to us on Friday, and hopefully will be sent around to us a bit earlier than that, as soon as we get it. So we will move on to, I've got one page 176, but my numbers are a wee bit out at the moment, so I'll just, it's probably 174. There we go, 174 onto the recommendations from the Assets and Infrastructure Committee, and we have Mr. Cook and Mr. Rendell. Who wants to start this one? Thank you, Mr. Cook.
Thank you. I'll open this one up. This proposal did receive a very positive reception at the Assets and Infrastructure Committee as a real practical step that the team can take to improve and deliver the solutions in an expedited way. And I'll pass over to Mr. Rendell for any questions.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say at this stage?
Just that the intent of the policy is to allow council to make some interventions on private property, private sewer laterals, to ensure that we are protecting our investment where we're undertaking wastewater works or roading works. At the moment, those assets are currently privately owned. All maintenance obligations remain with those particular customers, ratepayers, which means that we generally leave those assets in the condition that we find them, in an unknown condition, but then undertake works over the top of them. I'm just keen to see us do a little bit further digging and some more investigation to make sure we're getting the best value we can out of the assets that we build.
No, thank you. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Cowles.
Yeah, look, I'd just like to thank the team for putting this forward. It seems like a really practical solution. You know, we often there's suggestions that we dig up a road and then we're coming back and digging up it again in the future and these sorts of things. You know, if we've got visibility at the time, it just makes perfect sense for us to get on and get those things upgraded so that we don't have future issues and issues with pavement and those sorts of things. So I think this is a really good practical step for moving forward. And if there's others that aren't who don't wish to speak, but I'd be happy to move it.
I'll take that as a notice of motion. And another good question. I need to retrain you guys. We'll move to Councillor Schlack, then Councillor McCone.
Yep, just echoing what Councillor said. This went through committee. I think this is how committee should work. We discussed it there at length and very positive about it, so I'm happy to second it.
Right, we've got a seconder on that one and no other speakers on it. So I've got a mover and a seconder. Is there any other comments, councillors? Right, well, I'm going to, find the recommendation on here. So recommendation is that council adopts the private sewer laterals on a road reserve policy. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Thank you for all your work in that space, Mr. Rendell and team. Right, so I'm guessing I'm moving to about 194, which is confirmation of the non-confidential minutes. The first one being from the extraordinary council meeting from Tuesday, 9th of June. Is there any errors or omissions on that, or any questions, councillors? No. Do I have someone that's willing to move the minutes? Deputy Mayor Ryan moved. Seconded Councillor McCone. If there's no comments, I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That's carried. The next ones being on page 201, the unconfirmed minutes of Tuesday 23rd of June council meeting. Is there any errors or omissions, councillors? No. Do I have a mover for that? Moved Deputy Mayor Ryan, seconded Councillor Lewis. If there's no other comments, I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. July 7th, moved by, I've got a Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you. Just looking through into a reference to something that I said in that meeting. In the minutes it says this was an opportunity to shape what local voice would look like and redesign the governance structure in a way that better engaged voters. And while I referenced low voter turnout, I was really speaking about our general reach in council decision making around having better local voice and engagement of our wider community in council decision making, because we know that there are groups that aren't reaching. So yeah, I just wasn't sure that kind of reflected. The intention was not to say that we need to better engage voters, it was that we need to better engage our wider community. And I don't know, perhaps that didn't come across the way that I was meaning to, but yeah, because I did reference low voter turnout, but I just wouldn't want that to be the key takeaway of what I said in that meeting.
So potentially change that to the wider community, is this one?
Thank you.
Not a problem at all. Any other questions or omissions on that? Right, do I have someone moved by Deputy Mayor Ryan, seconded by Councillor Thowning? So I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That's carried, and that moves us on to the extraordinary council meeting for Thursday, 9th of July. Deputy Mayor Ryan.
I guess just a consistency question on that one. In other minutes, the public forum, there's been quite a detail, or at least some detail in what was spoken to in the public forum, and this one just sort of says as little as that person spoke in the meeting. So I was sort of just wondering, I guess, for consistency, what the approach was there.
Did you want to?
Would you like me to go back to the recording and perhaps flesh that out a little?
I mean, I don't really have a position on it. It was more just a question, I guess, on what our position is and how we do that, whether they spoke was enough in that situation.
There's no fixed policy or position. It usually depends on what else I've got happening.
Well, I wonder if maybe we add a bit of detail to the public forum conversation and that comes back. Is that the best way to handle that? Yes. All right, so we'll leave that on the table for amendment? Do I need to move that?
Yes. Just that the minutes be left on the table for amendment and come back to the next council meeting.
Okay, so I'll move that from the chair, seconded by Deputy Mayor Ryan. I will put that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That's carried. And that does move us into the public excluded part of the session. So for those watching online, thank you very much for joining us today. We will I vote that we move into public session. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Lewis. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That's carried.